I'm doing a series now. Today's sermon is Building a Home. Next Sunday's is Building a Life. And then the last one of May will be Building a World. Just to see whether, in fact, you will like that or not. Yes, indeed. Today is Mother's Day. Now, it's a very special time, a very challenging time to be a mother. My mother thought that the gift she received of this sweater, the brightly striped sweater, that it sort of helped her look slim. I don't know why some people want to look that way. I mean, they like it a lot. And so she had it on, and her 6-year-old son said, "That's a pretty sweater, Mommy. You look like Wheel of Fortune." Oh, she said, "You mean I look like Vanna White and all those beautiful dresses and gowns she wears?" "No, you look like the wheel." Well, different colors. Well, there's no doubt in today's celebration we could all conclude it's challenging to be a mom. What a privilege. What a responsibility. And I'm going to, and I continue to miss David Redding, because David Redding would tell it like it was. Whenever he would review any of my sermons, he would get to the heart of the issue. Your references are too far away, he'd say. You need something closer because it doesn't relate anymore. Well, with asking for forgiveness, I did come up with this one thought. I used Vietnam once, and he said, nah, don't use that. Use something closer, because too bad that we have closer wars to refer to, but use something closer. But I was reading about this journalist who went to Vietnam, 1965. And it was at a great time of crisis, great losses for our country. There were natural disasters, inhumanity towards other people. And this one reporter candidly said, "There's something that haunts me every day. I went to tour the hospital ship near South Vietnam. And his guide took him below deck to the very large room filled with soldiers recovering from all kinds of wounds and amputations and you name it. So just the horror that he described as he observed row upon row of these men and women lying in bandages. All were horribly wounded and in tremendous pain. Most of the soldiers moaned. Few cried out. And the one name they cried out constantly that he heard was Mother. Now, when their suffering was so great, unbearable, they didn't call for the doctor. They didn't call for the nurse. They called for their mothers. And he noted that in the very worst moments, when we are the most desperate for comfort, we return to the first love we ever knew, that of our mothers. Now, there's no relationship on earth more intimate than the relationship of a mother and her child, unless it hadn't been invented yet. I don't know. Nobody would doubt or disagree that there's an unexplained relationship between a mother and her children. We read of this phenomena in literature. It's hard to put into words. Mothers who are experiencing tragedies or near tragedies. We've heard the stories. They're in an airplane. The first thing mothers do is cover their child with their own bodies, so that when the plane crashes, their children will have a chance to live, even if they die. We've heard of those so many times. And children know the one person that knows them the best is their mother. Now, there's exceptions to the rule, I know, but they're far and few between, and they don't negate the fact that motherhood is that unique and precious thing that children throughout their lifetime remember, not only remember, but count on. Now, what this says to me is that the world is designed for love, for family, for relationship, for intimacy. There was a famous singer named Roland Hayes. His parents had been slaves. His father died when he was a boy. And he grew up in poverty. But he had a strong mother. And doors began to open for him because of his musical talent. People wanted to hear him sing. He even received an invitation to sing for the king in Great Britain. He sent the cable to his mother, and she responded with the cable back to him. Remember who you are. And in the home, it is where we learn who we are. Are we persons of worth, persons of value? Are we bright, capable persons of promise? I read in Ebony magazine about Karl Malone. Many of you fellas might know Karl Malone, Utah Jazz basketball star. Well, Karl had a rough life. His father left his mother and 8 children. Karl was very little. But Shirley Malone raised her children, all of them, by herself. She took 2 jobs. She scrimped, she saved to make the ends meet as a measure of her devotion. Well, there was no money in the Malone family for basketball equipment. There was no basketball court anywhere near. So when Karl became fascinated with the game called basketball, Shirley Malone became a human basketball hoop, holding up her arms so Karl could throw the ball through her hands. And, well, she was one of his most noteworthy role models. And he learned from his mother not just how to shoot basketballs. He learned that life was important and that his life was important. Now, I can relate to Karl Malone. Formative years as a child, raised by a single parent as I was. I believe Karl Malone learned lessons that many children learn even if there's no money in the house. And that's what is the reliable side of love, that you might say. So what is the unreliable side of love? Love can be wonderful, but it can also be dangerous and destructive. How many of us have tried love and have failed in the process? How many of us have been hurt in the process? How many of us keep going back to capture that elusive thing we yearn for, called love? Well, let's be serious. Love itself can cause people to lie and to cheat, to commit murder, and worst of all, write lyrics like these. Why do birds suddenly appear every time you are near? Well, now, that's the Carpenters. You know that. And I ask myself, do I really want to be near somebody who causes birds to appear suddenly? Didn't Alfred Hitchcock do a horror movie on birds? Well, with tongue in cheek, we say it's true. We need to have a more reliable gauge for our actions than our emotions. We need principles that grow out of our faith and our understanding of life itself. I know of somebody that is dating, but is not willing to compromise their principles in the process of dating. And if that person's not going to measure up for one reason or another, that person's got to go. That's it. Well, I respect that enormously. And I come to the ripe old age of 70. That's 70. Those values and those principles come from our homes. I remember a true story. Visual aid. A young man called his mother on Mother's Day from a San Francisco military hospital, returned from battle in Vietnam. He wanted to tell his family, Mom, happy Mother's Day. I'm here, finishing up my physical, and then I'm coming right home, Mom. Can't wait to see you on Mother's Day. Mom, it's going to be great. Oh, Jimmy, she said, my prayers have been answered. Can't wait to see you. We're going to have a really great homecoming for you. I'm going to start preparing as soon as I get off this phone. And I'm crying with tears of joy. Me too, Mom. I can't wait to get there. And by the way, would it be okay if my friend who is in my unit comes with me for that homecoming? Would it be okay if he came with me? He's a great guy, Mom. He and I are closer than brothers. Would it be okay, Mom? Well, I guess it'd be okay, she gradually said. But I got to tell you, Mom, he was wounded. And, he lost one of his eyes. And sometimes he has accidents before he gets to the bathroom. And since he has shrapnel in his jaw and his head, he drools a little bit. But the doctor said he'll get those stitches out. And when we were in battle, he accidentally stepped on a landmine and blew off one of his foot. Now, I told him you wouldn't care at all about those injuries. You love to invite him, Mom. And then he'll be released as soon as his injuries get a little better so he can go to his own home. So, can I bring him now, Mom? Can I bring him? Well, I don't know, Jimmy. After all, we're going to be celebrating your return. And it might be embarrassing. Some people have to see him like that. You know how some of our relatives are around handicapped people. Oh, no worries, Mom. I'll take good care of him. And I told him it wouldn't be a problem at all. You wouldn't care about his condition. Mom, he saved a lot of men in our unit. And some people owe their lives to him. Can I bring him home, Mom? Well, Jimmy, I'm not sure. When your Uncle Bob gets a few beers in him, he says some very salty things. And with all the preparations, it might just be uncomfortable a little bit for everybody else. Maybe it'd be best if he came some other time, considering all the care that he needs. And the whole town is going to be here. And we're going to have the news media and all. It's going to be great. The high school band is coming out. How would it look if he became a distraction? You know what I'm trying to say to you, son? Yeah, Mom, I know exactly what you're trying to say, but he won't be a problem at all. He was my best friend when we joined the unit. He's still my best friend. We're closer than brothers, as I said. I really wanted to meet you and the whole family, Mom. Well, to be honest, I would rather, Jimmy, some of the time and not make everybody feel so uneasy having to see him like that. But if you really want him to come, we'll hide our true feelings, and as hard as it might be, we'll welcome him too. But only if you absolutely insist. I'm sorry he was injured, but thank God you're not hurt. That's all that matters. And all of a sudden, the phone went dead. Jimmy's mother didn't think too much of it and actually started planning the homecoming. She made arrangements, and just as she said, the whole town was going to celebrate. And shortly thereafter, a chaplain from the Army called Jimmy's mother, Mrs. McKenzie. With sadness in my heart, I'm calling to tell you that your son, Private First Class James McKenzie, after speaking with you on the phone, had somehow managed to get himself out of bed, despite his injuries. He then went to an open window to the hospital where he was on the 8th floor, and he jumped to his death on the sidewalk. Your son's body will be airlifted and flown to your home for his burial. He will be buried with full military honors. We don't know what led him to jump out the window to his death, but she knew. On behalf of a grateful nation and the President of the United States, we thank you for his service to his country. Your son, Mrs. McKenzie, was a hero. His actions single-handedly saved the lives of several men in his unit, and posthumously, he will be awarded the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and the highest award ever, the Congressional Medal of Honor. We will need you and your husband to meet us at the military airport to identify his body for the purposes of releasing his remains. Well, Jimmy's mother couldn't move. She was in shock. She didn't know then what she would soon know. All the plans for Jimmy's homecoming were canceled. And when the flag-draped coffin was opened, to her utter shock, she saw her son, who was missing one eye, one foot, and he had stitches on his chest and his neck and on his head from all the shrapnel that they didn't get at all. For you see, Jimmy's mom had failed the test of unconditional love. He just couldn't bear the thought that his own family would not want to see him in that condition. And that being said, many families still are hard at work trying with deeply rooted unconditional love to raise children that would exemplify values and principles that we all could be proud of. I didn't see it, but in Ladies' Home Journal, they did a survey of working mothers, and they found that many of them indeed do love their children unconditionally, and their children learn that lesson first. The point is that the inculcation of values is the second of three tasks in the home. These are critical. The first is a formation of something called identity. The second is the formation of something called character. The third is the creation of the place of security in an uncertain world where our young people can always return. That's the one thing, the best thing you can ever give your children is for them to know that they have a place to come home to, and whatever happens to them, they can come home. What is that? The highest responsibility that we are confronted with. What is that? We were created out of love. We were created for unconditional love. For the very nature of our existence is love. That's the tie that binds us. As individual families, and as the family we would call sacred, our ties are not to be severed, except in the most extraordinary circumstances. Your children, my children, and on and on and on, make mistakes in life. Boy, don't I know that. They do make mistakes. But they need to know that there's one place that they can come to and always receive forgiveness, always be nurtured, and always receive unconditional love. That's at home. And part of our responsibility is to create a secure place where they can return. It's really our goal to be there when they need us. Your children never stop being your children, no matter how old they get. My son is 47. My other son is 43. And if you were to listen to some of the phone calls that I have with them, you would see that bears what I'm saying out. your children never stop being your children. We need to be there when they need us to protect them from unknown dangers and pitfalls that confront them. Now, juxtapose the lesson that Jimmy taught his mother, sadly, about unconditional love with this other true story that happened to me. Whenever I fly on an airplane, I always resist sitting in the middle seat. I always think that somebody will hog the armrests, like it's not too, all right. But I also think that nothing good can come from a bad attitude. So I usually look to other things. If I got to sit in that middle seat, well, think about other things. So one time, I turned my attention to this very polite young man who was seated near the window. I remember his name. It was Michael. Immediately, I guessed correctly. He had impeccable manners and made me feel old by constantly calling me sir. And he was a member of the armed services. Now, my son was a member of the armed services, active duty in the Marines, and now serving in the Air Force Reserve, still doing it. So I have some idea when I'm in the presence of someone who has had military training, and I'm not a military man, but as it turns out, this young man named Michael, sitting by the window next to me, was just returning from a year and a half in Desert Storm. Michael was nervous. He was returning home. He was afraid that his family would be expecting a hero. He was afraid of crying in front of everybody. He'd been away in a difficult situation, in the company of rough and tough men. He didn't know how much he had changed or how much the family had changed. So he was looking forward to two things when he got off that plane. He wanted to tell his mother how much her letters meant to him. And he wanted his little nephews to call him Uncle Michael. Well, being a parent myself of a man who serves in the armed services, I thought I could offer a sympathetic ear. I told him about my son's return of duty in a country called Djibouti. I didn't even know there was a country named Djibouti. And I prayed every night, and I worried like I'd never worried before. I just couldn't sleep knowing that he was over there. Well, he came back. And I hope some of you will be able to see my son, and maybe he'll get here. I mean, they keep telling me that they'll get here, but who knows? Well, I told him about my son John. I told Michael about my son John. And when we finally landed and getting off the plane, he shook my hand, and instantly, just naturally, he gave me a hug. I have to say, it was something that meant the whole world to me. And before the plane landed, I went to the bathroom. I told the flight attendant about Michael. And sure enough, he told the captain about him. And the captain, on the loudspeaker intercom, said, "It has come to my attention that we have a VIP on board. He's a returning GI from Desert Storm, and he's seated in seat 12F. And as a representative of the airline and a citizen of the United States of America, I salute you, Michael, and thank you for a job well done." Well, the other passengers broke out in emotional applause, enthusiastic applause. And I must say, I had a tear in my eye as I was looking at him. And then after the plane landed and the passengers filed off, well, you know me, I'm a softie. I had to linger. I stayed back a little bit. I had to see this. I wanted to see Michael reunite with his family because things like that move me. I spotted his family immediately. No question about it. It wasn't hard to tell who his mother was. And as soon as she spotted her son through the crowd, she began to cry. And then her tears were everywhere. And Michael went to the sobbing woman and wrapped his arms around her for the longest hug. And everybody had hugs all the way around. And then they left and went down to get their luggage. And I saw a little boy scamper over to Michael and kept tugging at him. And Michael picked him up. And someone said, "Oh, you little tyke. Honey, who's got you? Who's got you? Who's holding you?" "My Uncle Michael." Well, alone in my thoughts, as I departed the airport, I felt Michael was very fortunate to have a home to go back to. Everybody needs that. Everyone needs that. It doesn't matter if or when you leave, if you come back defeated, if you come back in disgrace, if you come back wounded, your family, as well as your people, will welcome you with open arms. Everybody needs a home like that. Everyone needs a home where they can have a healthy sense of their own identity. Everyone needs a home where they're taught principles and values that will last a lifetime. Everybody needs to know that they can go back home. You might call that mushy sentimentality. I call it unconditional, authentic love. And no matter how elusive it is, it will be the greatest reward we can ever hope to have. And of course, you know the next three words that I'm going to say. Thank you, my love.